Some of you are praying with passion, but you're panicking in private. And if you're wondering what that means, it means that you say that you trust God, but your actions are showing that you're relying on your own strength. And so what I want to do in this episode is I want to help you break the cycle that is blocking your miracle. So let's get into it. I wanted to talk about this topic today because I just experienced this in a season that I just overcame. I was in a season where I had a pressing issue and I needed God to come through for me in a certain amount of time. And I was stuck in a situation where I had to make the decision between trusting God or trying to force things to happen myself. And I'm not going to lie, being in this season put me in an emotional roller coaster because I can get on here and I can lie and I can say, yeah, it was so easy to choose God. Yeah, I didn't feel no temptation to figure this out myself. Yeah, I didn't even try to figure this out myself. I just sat back and was like, okay, God, do what you do. But that is not the truth. Every single minute of the day, I was tempted to say, forget God's plan, forget whatever God is trying to do. I'm about to figure this out, especially because not only did I have to wait on God, but I was also in a season where God was silent. Anytime I ever prayed to him about this, he would either tell me to wait or he wouldn't say anything at all. It was to the point where if I was to pray to him about something else, he would answer me like that. Like he would answer me immediately. But when I would pray about this situation, silence. And the mental battle that I was on, the faith battle that I was on, the temptation that I felt was so strong. And I wanted to do this episode because I don't want to be one of those Christian people who be fake with you. And when you're going through real life situations or when you're going through a test with God, I lie to you and say, everything's going to be so easy. You're going to make it through. You're not going to give into temptation. You're not going to feel the temptation. No, I want to be real with you about how you're going to feel, what you're going to be tempted by. And I want to help you actually avoid giving into that temptation. And so I want to talk to you about a few things that God taught me and also showed me while I was going through this. And the first thing that he led me to was a story in the Bible. And that story, if you want to follow along, is 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 8 through 16. To give a little context of what this story is about, this is when Elijah the prophet prayed that there will not be any rain. And after he prayed that prayer, God told him to go out and hide, and he was providing food and water for him while he was hiding. But then he ran into a problem because the food and water ran out. So now in this part of the story, God tells Elijah to go to a city, and when he goes to that city, he will meet a widow who will provide him with food and water in this season. So we are going to start at verse 8, and we're going to read to verse 16. It says, "Then the Lord said to Elijah, 'Go and live in the village of Zarephath, near the city of Sidon. I have instructed a widow there to feed you.' So he went to Zarephath. As he arrived at the gates of the village, he saw a widow gathering sticks, and he asked her, 'Would you please bring me a little water in a cup?' As she was going to get it, he called to her, 'Bring me a bite of bread too.' But she said, 'I swear by the Lord your God that I don't have a single piece of bread in the house, and I have only a handful of flour left in the jar and a little cooking oil in the bottom of the jug. I was just gathering a few sticks to cook this last meal, and then my son and I will die.' But Elijah said to her, 'Don't be afraid. Go ahead and do what you just said, but make a little bread for me first. Then use what's left to prepare a meal for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow again.' So she did as Elijah said, and she and Elijah and her family continued to eat for many days. There was always enough flour and olive oil left in the containers, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah." So I want to stop right there. In this story, you will notice that the widow had a problem. The problem was her and her family needed to eat, but she had limited resources in order to do so. She explains her problem to Elijah, and Elijah tells her to use her limited resources to make him some bread first, and then use what's left over to feed her and her family. Now, when I first read this, I felt like this was crazy. Imagine having limited resources to the point where you don't know what you're going to do after you run out of this, and someone asks you to take that resource and use it on them. I was sitting there trying to put myself in the widow's shoes, thinking if this was my last little bit of food and after this I didn't know what I was going to eat and I felt like I was going to starve and die. If that was my last dollar and then after that I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills and my lights were going to be off. If that was my last resource that I feel like I need to spend on me and someone is calling me to use it on them, would I be willing to? And as I was sitting here thinking about this, God spoke to me and he made me realize the widow surrendered everything she had. Think about this for a minute. The widow represents us, and Elijah represents God. The widow had a problem and she had a lack of resources. Elijah came to her. She explained her problem to Elijah, and immediately he said, "Give it to me. Take that problem and give it to me." And God is saying right now, you have a problem and what's in your hand does not feel like enough to overcome this issue. And a lot of you are thinking the way that I'm thinking, where I'm looking at it like, if this was my last, why would I give it up? If this was my last, why would I give it to someone else? But God is saying to you today, what do you believe in more? What do you trust more? Do you believe in your problem? Do you believe in your lack of resources? Or do you believe in me? And if you believe in me, you have to prove it. And the way that you prove it is through your actions. Because remember what I said at the start of this episode. A lot of us pray with passion, but we panic in private. We speak boldly with our words and say, I trust God, but our actions show the worry. Our actions show the stress. Our actions show what we are actually trusting in. And God is saying, if you trust me, give it to me. Meaning, when you tell me your situation, just like the widow told Elijah, immediately after that, Elijah gave her an instruction and she obeyed. That is her giving and surrendering her situation, giving and surrendering her resources to God. So when you come to me and you tell me your situation and I tell you, give it to me, that is you proving your trust to God. Have we ever thought, and I honestly didn't think about this till right now in this very moment. This is not even in my notes. But in my situation, remember I said that it was so hard for me because God would speak to me about everything else. But when it came to this one thing that I really needed him to come through for, the only thing that he gave me was silence, or he told me to wait. Have we ever thought that maybe the reason why God is silent is because he wants to see if you truly surrendered? It's one thing to say, I give it to you, God. But then right after you stop praying, you're online Googling how to get through the season. It's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to show it with your actions. And maybe the reason why God is silent is because he wants you to show it with your actions. By you waiting on him, you are proving that you trust him. Think about the widow for a minute. She is on the verge of starving. She was ready to prepare her last supper. And by Elijah telling her, take your resource and prepare some bread for me first, she took her attention off of her issue. Her issue was that she needed food for her and her family. But I'm going to step away from my issue and I'm going to do something to honor God. And in return, he's going to honor me. Instead of spending all day stressing about my problems, stressing about how I'm going to eat, stressing about how I'm going to figure out my problems, I'm going to use this time to honor God and do what he told me to do, even if it's in a different area. Maybe that's the reason why God is speaking to you about this thing and this thing and this thing, but he's not speaking to you about this. Because I want you to work over here. And while you're working over here, I'm building up this area that you were stressing about. I'm building up this area that you were worried about. I'm building up this area that you felt like you weren't even going to make it through. And your obedience over there is going to bless you over here. Another thing that I realized in this story, and this will really help you if you're in a season where you feel like you're waiting on God and you've been struggling with temptation of trying to figure things out yourself. In this story, we see two plans take place. We see the widow's plan and we see God's plan. The widow's plan was to take the sticks, right? Use the sticks and the rest of her resources to prepare a meal for her and her son. But after that last meal, she had no other plan, and she was prepared for her and her family to die. Then we see God's plan. God's plan was for her to use her resources to prepare a meal for Elijah, then use what's left over to prepare a meal for herself. And then after that, they will be provided for the entire time that there was no rain. What God showed me through this story is that our plans will only take us so far before they die, and God's plans will take us to a place of abundance. When we feel temptation to figure things out ourselves, usually we are not thinking logically, we are thinking emotionally. But if you would just take a moment to take your emotions out of it and look at your plan, analyze your plan, and ask yourself, how far will this plan actually take me? And I want you to be real about this, because I'm saying this from experience. I just went through this. When I was in that space of trying to figure things out myself, I realized that my plan was going to satisfy me for the moment, but long term, I was still going to be struggling. In the widow's story, her plan was going to satisfy her for the moment, but long term, she was going to die. Sometimes we have to look at our plan and we have to ask ourselves, is it really worth it? Is it really worth it to give into this for a temporary high, for a temporary satisfaction, when we can just wait on God, get his plan, follow his plan, and live in abundance? When you take your emotions out of it, you'll start to realize your plan is not worth it. God's way is the only way. It's the only way that you're going to get abundance. Yeah, you might get a short-term win with yours right now, but you're not going to get abundance from it. So you have to ask yourself, do you want to be like the widow? And do you want to go with her plan, where she's satisfied temporary, but she dies in the end? Or do you want to do what she did and follow God's plan, where not only is she satisfied in the moment, but we see that it says in verse 16, there was always enough. She lived in abundance. She was always provided for. She didn't lack anything. She didn't have to pray over this need again. Think about that for a minute. How many times have you went with your own plan and you find yourself still praying over the same thing that you prayed to God over before? You're stuck in a cycle. You prayed to God to be able to pay your light bill this month, but you wouldn't wait on him. So you figured it out yourself. But now you're entering the next month and you still don't know how you're going to pay that bill. You're stuck in a cycle of praying to God over the same thing over and over and over again. But notice the story of the widow. She did it God's way, and she didn't have to go to him about food ever again. It was already there because his plan led to abundance. Her plan would have led to destruction. Your plan is going to lead to destruction. The only way to get abundance, the only way to make it through this, the only way to not go through a cycle is by following God's way. And so I know you're probably listening to this and you're probably like, okay, but like, how am I supposed to trust God? I'm going to give you 3 things that I did when I was in this season. The first thing that I did is I started to speak. The Bible says that life and death is in the power of the tongue. What you say will determine what you see. And one thing that I learned, like I said, waiting on God is not easy. You're going to be stressed. You're going to have doubts. You're going to have, thoughts that tell you like you're waiting on nothing. God isn't going to come through, blah, 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 blah. Every single time you get those thoughts, you have to speak back to it. It does not matter if you find yourself speaking 100 times a day. Speak every single time over those thoughts, and speak not what you see, but what you want to see, the outcome that you want God to provide. And if you're wondering what to say, this is technically the second thing, but if you're wondering what to say, you can either say things like, today is the day that God does this, or today is the day that God blesses me with the money for my light bill, or thank you, Jesus, for blessing me with the money for my light bill. You can even speak, like it's already been done. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you have to speak this 100 times a day. Start speaking back to your thoughts. And the third thing that I want you to do is I want you to prove to God that you release control. Remember in the story of the widow, she did not spend her time stressing and still trying to figure out her own plan of how to get food and this, that, and the third. The moment God spoke to her, she immediately went and she was obedient. She did something to honor him by helping Elijah and preparing a meal for him. If God gives you an instruction on something to do that has absolutely nothing to do with your situation, obey it. And if he doesn't, and he tells you to do something as simple as wait, then I want you to do something to distract yourself. Don't spend all day stressing and worrying and Googling how to come up with $300 for the light bill or something, Don't do that. Go read a book. Go watch TV. Go do something to take your mind off of it. One thing that I learned on my journey is that it's in the moments where we least expect it, where we're not stressing over it, when God moves the most. Your words and your actions is going to show God how much you trust him. And so I understand that you're in a season where you need an answer and time is running out. But I want you to take the initiative today to do something that you've never done before and trust God fully. But that is all that I have for you today. Before we go, I do have an action step that I want to give you. Sometime this week, I want you to monitor every time you feel fear, worry, or pressure over your situation. Then I want you to speak back to those thoughts or to those feelings and continue to do it until you see God show up for you. But that is all that I have for you today. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe so that you get a notification every time a new episode is released. Also, leave a review and let me and others know how you enjoyed the show. And if you want to stay connected, follow me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Prospering with Christ. But that's all I have for you today, and I will see you next week.